All right.
Yep.
I was
8:55.
going to ask you a question. What type of phone do you have? It's different than mine. All right. All right. We are, once again, we've come out of executive session. It's 8:56 p.m. and we will continue where we left off with our regular meeting, which was at public participation. So are there any members of the public who wish to participate at this time in public participation? Mr. Kirsch? You know the routine. Thank you. Name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Kirsch, 35 Applegate Lane. Maybe later on, this is really for the first selectman. Following the storms, he came to the council and said we were going to do a post-storm, post-outage assessment, and I'm wondering if there's any update that can be provided either now or during his report.
Thank you, Mr. Kirsch. Any other members of the public who wish to participate at this time? All right, seeing none, I'll close public participation. There are no appointments this evening. Our action items, A is the Town Council Committee on Finance, Education, Health, and Public Safety. Mr. Tellis?
That's not me.
I'm sorry, Ms.
A condo or
Conley.
charity.
Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have not met since last council.
Wow, now it's getting to be.
I do that to you every week, Mr. Rooney, don't I? It's becoming
Every other week.
every meeting. That's correct. Touche. B, Town Council Committee on Planning and Zoning, Public Works, Parks and Recreation. That must be you, Ms. LaPaz.
It is, and Planning and Zoning did not have, they canceled their meeting. Park and Rec, number one, Rick Henderson and Chuck Finter came before for the American Youth Football. They want to put up a storage shed at Wolf Park to hold equipment. During the last several years, AYF changed teaching methods due to safety considerations, so they had to purchase new equipment, tackle dummies, padding, helmets, etc. Existing storage is 8 by 10 is not large enough. They proposed at the Monroe Lions full expense the purchase of a shed approximately 12 by 16 to store equipment and fencing. So they're flexible, but they're close enough to the field to be convenient. And the next thing, the shed, Mr. Henderson estimated a cost between $5,000 to $6,000, which would be more economical than building an enclosure under the announcement booth, which is what they were discussing. So that was number one. Number two, the farmers market has outgrown space at Town Green and is investigating different locations such as Wolf Park, Great Hollow Lake, Fireman's Field, and St. Jude parking area. Park locations are problematic due to sports, camps, concerts, and picnic reservations. There are concerns also with trash removal, recycling, and trailers. Going on, our first selectman, Ken Kellogg, and Town Attorney Jeremy Hayden are concerned with alcohol at the park and liability. Meeting was held with Kerma, and insurance policies for beer, wine usage discussed. Cost of insurance, possibly $100 to $300 for each occasion, may be cost prohibitive and lead to a decrease in picnic reservations. Discussion followed regarding enforcement of insurance policy, picnic monitoring, and possible liability waiver. And that's Park and Rec. And then the Conservation Commission for Water, Frank Cooper, you probably know, retired as Director of Parks and Rec. He was very helpful to the commission and will be missed. And a portion of the June 2nd Trails Day hike will be a joint hike with Shelton. I mean, this I think is interesting, maybe for some of you who do that kind of stuff. It will be in the Connecticut Forest and Parks Association booklet and the Monroe Park and Rec activities brochure. The Land Trust is also supporting the April 18th tree ID walk at Great Hollow. I think that's passed. Oak Grove Meadow, that's where I mentioned they had the pollinator garden coming out where like bees and lots of insects that will pollinate the flowers and make the gardens much prettier. Oak Grove Meadow, June 24th is the date for opening event to show the meadow to the public. And two of their members had recommended a handout referencing current and future plants in the meadow and information for homeowners for their home gardens. And basically, that is it, except for one other. Funding for GIS work associated with the detailed open space map is included in the 2018-2019 capital improvement plans, land use, planning, and zoning. The work will be done by MetroCog. The 2018-2019 town budget passed on April 3rd. GIS will begin after July 1st. That's my report.
Thank you, Ms. LaPellis. Moving on to action item C is the Town Council Committee on Legislative and Administrative Matters. Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did meet prior to council tonight. Most of our agenda will be covered in the new business part of the council meeting tonight. The one that is not is under rules of procedure. I have received some feedback from various council members. We're going to try to cut that off by next meeting, so the first meeting in May. So if anybody has any comments on rules of procedure, please get that to me by then, because we're going to redline it in LNA for the next meeting and then present that to council.
Great.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Madam Clerk, I'll just note, I didn't mention it before, but in the minutes of the last meeting, you have Mr. Reed's name, R-E-E-D, instead of R-E-I-D, and he didn't also tell you, so he made me know. I'm kidding, I'm joking.
You spelled my name correct.
All right, moving on to D, Strategic Planning Committee, that's Mr. Condon.
Strategic Planning met. We will be meeting again on May 10th to discuss the space planning needs and review with 2 different firms.
Thank you, Mr. Condon. Moving on to item E is the EMS Building Committee, that's Mr. Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The EMS Building Committee did meet. We moved forward the RFP template. We also made a motion during that meeting to put the dates for moving the RFP forward at the discretion of the Selectman's office. Also, in addition to that, the state STEEP grant requires some paperwork to report the progress of the committee. That has also been completed. And that is all.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chairman.
Moving on to the First Selectman's update, Mr. Kellogg.
The fire services.
I'm sorry, Fire Services, Mr. Condon.
No action required at this time, but the consultants will be coming back with a preliminary report in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Condon. Mr. Kellogg is First Selectman's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the prepared report, there's a few items that actually we haven't discussed since the last council meeting, but some of them have, I've either through press releases or through conversations have been covered in the local press, so they may not be new to you, but I want to make sure that I did report to you on them. One is the replacement of the Stevenson Dam Bridge. Something that the state has started. It is a very long-term project. They're talking about in the year 2024, but the point is that there will be future public meetings that I will encourage everyone, including this council, to attend and inform yourselves so we can be part of that process. The state will be evaluating replacement in the current location as well as to areas to either side of that, rather, a decent area there. So more to come on that. We're very early in the process, but I want to make sure everyone's aware of it. Secondly, the Route 25 and 111 traffic study. We're at the point where the study committee is now going to start providing alternatives and ideas towards improving traffic on both routes. These are very, very long-term concepts, not things that would be undertaken all at once, but information will be coming out. Asked prior to public information sessions, which are forthcoming, I believe some of them may be as early as this spring or summer. I've asked for a stakeholder meeting for some of the landowners that might be directly impacted by some of the proposed alternatives on Route 25 and 11. So we will be holding those sessions in the near future so that they can get some advanced information and be informed, and then obviously they could continue to participate in the public information sessions. The Neighborhood Assistance Act, I wanted to make sure this council is aware of. This is a program that I thought Monroe should participate in. It's a very broad program that allows various municipal projects and nonprofits to apply through the municipality for the program that they want funding, where they want to accept donations and contributions. And you can see some of the programs that I've listed there, bulleted for you. They're very broad. We have many programs in town that I think would qualify, and there are certainly some nonprofit ideas here that would qualify as well. This allows programs that are approved to be by the state to receive donations and by corporate entities, and then they would receive a corporate tax credit. So not all businesses would qualify. You have to have a corporate tax. So in that regard, it's a little bit limited, but it's certainly more than we've availed these programs and are corporate business partners in the past, and in some casual conversations with some other corporations, they are participating in other communities. So I would be hopeful that we can get some Monroe programs in on this. The one point I want to make clear is I've set a mid-May deadline for those applications to come to my office. The reason being is I will ask the council to hold a public hearing for the applications. That's part of the requirements. And then from there, we will be able to submit our package to the state by the deadline. So more to come on that. And just to, I know it's not in the written report, but just to address some of the items that came up earlier. First, in regards to the after-action report relative to our storm response, we have been attempting to schedule that. We've had scheduling conflicts primarily with Eversource. There have been some changes in assignments in terms of who's covering which towns, and so we're trying to avail not just the folks that were involved, but also the people that will be involved going forward, because they're all still there, so that they have the benefit of that. And we're also looking to go not just to the people we dealt with day to day, but also a level or two above that, so they can be at the meeting as well. So we're literally in the process of scheduling that with the emergency management officials, our EMD and our deputy EMD, Captain Keith White. So it is on our radar. It is in the process, and we actually did have a brief meeting with Eversource last. I want to say it was that Chief? Was that last week?
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. We had a brief meeting with them, not specifically with the storm, but we did touch upon a few things already. So kind of working towards that after action review. I want to just address a couple items that came up in committee reports. One is just to be clear, there have been some discussions about the farmers market outgrowing the green space. I've had a meeting with the departments that are involved, as well as the farmers market committee leadership, and we're hopeful that we're obviously on the cusp of this year's program. We don't want to lose any momentum in a very, very successful market. So we believe, we had a meeting again, the primary issues have to do with sight lines and public safety issues. The police department participated in that meeting, and we believe we have some opportunities to make some improvements and be very kind of strict in that regard, so that we can ensure the safety of the public. The other issue, quite frankly, has to deal with the trees on the green. We have an opinion from, we had some concerns about continued vehicular traffic on the green and causing the trees to suffer as a result. That is something that we had an arborist give an opinion on, and they were pretty emphatic that that is a concern. So again, we do have a plan in that regard to ensure that vehicles do not remain parked over the basically it's the drip line of the trees, and also so that as vehicles have to enter the green area, it will be done in a very controlled manner. So the long and the short of it is, we think we have a workable plan this year. We're going to continue to work through this and see how this goes, and obviously we'll continue to evaluate and with the committee and get some more input from the committee in terms of how we proceed. We did have some preliminary discussions about using other areas such as Fireman's Field, but that, I think for this year, we'll be okay, but it's an ongoing conversation. The other item I want to address was the comment made about alcohol in the parks. The issue that presents itself is that, we currently, I do not think it's appropriate to have alcohol served in town buildings. It is something that our insurance company has also advised us against. There is one exception currently in our parks. We allow, when people rent pavilions, them to be able to bring in, alcohol as part of that permit. It's something that goes before the Parks and Rec Commission. So the process that we're looking at is just to make sure the town is not overly exposed by allowing that. So we have a couple of options available. One would be purchase, there's actually three options available. One would be, let's say if it's a corporate entity, they can provide us with a certificate of insurance, and then we would be covered in that regard. Second is we have a program through KERMA called TULIP, which allows an organization to buy basically a one-day event insurance, and they do have a rider that would cover serving alcohol, so we could offer that to the individual. There is a cost associated with that. And the third option that I've asked our town attorney to dig into is, the third option would be allow, if they do not want to avail themselves of those two, would be to simply provide the town with a release and hold harmless indemnification. So that's the process that I think that would allow, you know, us to continue that practice, but ensure that the town is not needlessly or, you know, overly exposed for some, you know, something that unfortunate that might occur. So I want to dispel any rumors that we're changing fundamentally in terms of what we're going to allow in those park permits. We're just trying to make sure the town is adequately covered. So,
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Is that all?
that is all.
Okay.
Can I ask a question,
Ms.
Mr.
Aguilar.
Chairman? Mr. Kellogg, with the Neighborhood Assistance Act, is
Yes.
that gonna be, told to department heads? Are department
It has
heads
been.
available and
It has
committees and chair, okay.
It has been. I also communicated to select boards and commissions, the ones that like conservation, and I tried to, you know, reach out as broadly as I could. We did put it in the a press release of the Courier, which they were good enough to print. I think they're gonna reprint something for us this week, so spread the word. Any local nonprofit or, and of course, I would hope that we'll put things in for our food pantry, Project
Yeah.
Warmth,
And they
library.
don't have
I
to
mean,
be-
we have plenty of programs that will qualify.
They don't have to be town affiliated, correct?
Correct.
They could be- okay.
Yes, any community nonprofit that would meet the criteria in terms of, you know, the type of program that they're looking to put on.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, moving on to unfinished business. Item A is Chalk Hill. I do not believe there is anything to discuss relative to Chalk Hill. It's on the agenda, though. It's open for discussion. Anybody? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to new business. A is the Monroe Police Union Council Number 4 AFSCME contract. Mr. Pellet, is there a motion?
Yep. Resolved that the town of Monroe accept the tentative agreement by and between the Monroe Police Union, AFSCME Council 4, as presented, and authorizes Ken M. Kellogg, first selectman of the town of Monroe, to execute and deliver any such documents to implement the terms thereof.
Motion by Ms. Lopellis by way of resolution. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. This is an agreement that was discussed in a non-meeting previous to council this evening. So other than those discussions, if anybody else has anything further to say this time? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, that motion carries 9-0. Moving on to new business, item B is the employee separation agreement and release. Mr. Pellis?
Resolved that Kenneth M. Kellogg, first selectman, is authorized to execute and deliver the employee separation agreement and release as presented, and any such documents and instruments necessary to implement the terms thereof.
Resolution introduced by Ms. Lopellis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rooney. This matter was discussed in executive session. So at this time, I'll ask if there's additional discussion, but, okay. And seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, that motion carries 9-0. Moving on to item C is the design agreement with 4D Design and Decorating LLC for the Edith Wheeler Memorial Library East Wing redesign. Mr. Pellis?
I will introduce the following resolution regarding the Edith Wheeler Memorial Library East Wing redesign agreement with 4D Design and Decorating LLC, and move for its adoption.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Lopellis. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. For discussion purposes, I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I respectfully request that the motion be amended to specifically authorize me to execute and deliver the agreement on behalf of the town.
Yep, I just didn't see that. It's there. I apologize.
All right, I will move to amend the motion to incorporate that language. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mauer. Any discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none, all those in favor? And against, motion carries 9-0. Before the floor is the amended motion. Mr. Kellogg, the
Thank
floor is
you.
yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as you are all probably aware, there was some damage done in the east wing of our library by a water leak over the winter storms. That damage is going to be covered by insurance through KERMA. However, as you also know from, or many of you know from prior meetings with the library and the library board before this council, the library had undertaken a strategic plan. Part of that was the future layout and possible redesign of some of the spaces in the library after being in operation of 10 years and possibly wanting to re-envision some of those spaces. This area is one of those areas that they would like to redesign. So rather than putting it back the way it was, it would make more sense to put it back the way they want it to be in the future. So they've kind of accelerated this portion of that in that light. So this would be a teen area with a maker's cafe, audiovisual area, new books and magazine area. Our library director did obtain some quotes and settled on the design company 4D Design and Decorating LLC. So the idea here would be to have this design work completed so that they could move forward and understand what their future design would be from a cost perspective as well. The cost of the design agreement would be covered, would be funded through the Wheeler Trust, as would any future remodeling, redesign of that area. And again, the cost of much of the supplies and some of the remediation, such as carpeting and some of that, will be covered through KERMA, through our claim. So, and if you have any additional questions, I'm sure Mark would be more than happy to speak to them.
And before we move on, Mr. Reed, was this matter discussed in LNA this evening?
Yes, sir.
And that vote passed 3-0 in LNA for consideration by council. So I'd just like to remind council and the general public of all the good work that we do discussing these on the, drill down on these agreements in subcommittee, which is why sometimes there's not much discussion up here about the agreements. Any questions or further comments or discussion regarding this matter? Is there something?
Yes?
No?
Thank you.
All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, the motion carries 9-0. Moving on to item D is our Parks and Recreation summer salary schedule.
I make a motion to approve the Parks and Recreation Summer Salary Schedule 2018.
Motion by Mr. Pellis, is there a second? Second by Mr. Rooney. Mr. Kellogg, as has become customary, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the summer, the Parks and Rec summer staff, I don't believe is something that may not have come before you in the past. This is something that the Parks and Rec Commission has deliberated on, and at their April 2nd meeting did approve. I felt it was appropriate to bring it before council as well. This is, and Missy can certainly speak to this further, but I believe this is essentially unchanged from the prior year. She did do some analysis of neighboring communities, and I believe we are within the market for summer temporary employment.
Any questions? I just want to say again, thank you to Mr. Kellogg and our interim Parks and Recreation Director for bringing this to council's attention. I can say since I've been on council, this is the first time we've seen this particular schedule. And I think it's important that these matters, obviously pursuant to charter and otherwise, come before council, but that we're able to understand what's going on. We did know about this exclusion of these salaries when we went through the part-time pay plan, so we're certainly aware of it. And it was excluded due to the seasonal nature of the employment. I don't know if there's any questions formally.
I do recall from those conversations, though, a desire to see them in the
Correct.
future,
Yes.
so that's why I'm bringing it to you.
No questions? Any questions for our interim Parks and Recreation Director?
Is
We
that-
have,
is
we
that
we have to
person here
make her, we have to
tonight?
make her
Yep. This is
understand
back.
that, you know,
Okay, I haven't met her.
no
so-
hard-hitting questions for Missy, no?
Wow.
Mr. Mauer, thank you very much.
Do we have any idea as to approximately how many people fit into the different levels that are discussed within the,
Well, I'll stand up. There's like different steps that we have, so
Right.
like if we hire a brand new 16-year-old camp counselor or admissions monitor, he or she starts at level 1, and then every year they come back. So we have about, at this point, I have 17 lifeguards coming back, and they're actually in range of lifeguard 2 to lifeguard 4 on the sheet there. And we have our 2 head guards that have been with us for a while, they're coming back, so, you know, it just depends on how many years of service they've already had, so it's about average, they're in their second or third season with us.
do we have anybody, or do we have people who do come back and who are in that 5th, 6th plus range?
This year I have 1 person that's coming back, but I'm hiring a lot of brand new first year, so we'll be low on the budget there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, everything contemplated here is within our budget.
Great. Anything further? All right, well, thank you for bringing it to our attention. Look forward to seeing it every single year from here on. And with that said, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? None against, motion carries 9-0. Moving on to item D is the design agreement with Jakunski Humes for the space needs assessment at Monroe Fire 1. Mr. Claus.
I make a motion to adopt the following agreement between the Monroe Volunteer Fire Department Space Needs Assessment, Jakunsi Homes, and the Town of Monroe. Resolved that Kenneth M. Kellogg, First Selectman of the Town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the Town of Monroe the design agreement and any associated documents by and between Jakunski Humes Architects LLC for the space needs assessments, site evaluation, schematic design, and professional cost estimating services for Monroe Fire Headquarters.
Resolution introduced by Ms. LaPallas. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Condon. Before we begin the discussion, I'll just note for the record that this agreement was reviewed in LNA, passed unanimously for consideration by council, and we also have an opinion letter from our town attorney. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this project or our concept goes back several months. This is actually something that was started, a discussion that occurred after, while we were doing the EMS feasibility study and recognition that there was one piece of fire apparatus that would ultimately have to be relocated, which led us to more discussions with the Monroe Volunteer Fire Department in terms of some of the needs they had at what would be their one remaining station, in addition to, not just that one vehicle, but some other needs they may have there. There was significant discussion at the Strategic Planning Committee. Again, this was prior to November, where we discussed this agreement at length. There was a significant modifications that were made. It was based off of the EMS feasibility design agreement that we had also used Jakunski Humes for. And there were some slight changes to scope in terms of reduction of scope. We were able to negotiate a slightly better price, a lower cost than it was for the EMS study because of that reduced scope. But that said, we're following basically the same process and concept that we did there. And the intent would be to be able to understand what those needs are so we can move forward in parallel with the EMS building committee. Because we have a fire study also going on, I did reach out to those consultants and was assured that there was nothing coming that they anticipated in their analysis that would cause us to deviate from this plan. In fact, they were somewhat, they were very forceful in saying that this would be a good idea. They recommended that we proceed in that regard. So, again, something I think we need to move forward on so that we can understand the big picture and how these pieces relate and move forward.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. I'll also just mention, because I do recall this agreement has been discussed by SBC, the prior members of SBC, prior members of LNA, and then the current members of LNA, so both current council members and prior council members. So I just want to thank everybody for their collaboration. There was a number of revisions and good collaboration with Monroe Fire, town attorney, and selectman's office to get this agreement to where it is and prepared. So thank you for that. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, motion carries 9-0. Moving on to item F is the purchase and sale agreement for the 1999 Spartan Quality Pumper, Botsford Fire and Rescue Company. Mr. Pellis?
I will introduce the following resolution regarding the sale of 1999 Spartan Quality Pumper and move for its adoption. Resolved that Kenneth M. Kellogg, first selectman of the town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the town of Monroe the purchase and sale agreement and the associated transfer of title for the sale of the 1999 Spartan Quality Pumper to the Botsford Fire and Rescue Company.
Motion by way of resolution by Mr. Pellis, there second by Mr. Rooney. Again, for discussion, unanimous, 3-0, passed in LNA for consideration by council, and the town attorney has reviewed and issued an opinion letter. Move the floor to you, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously, there's a couple of vehicles before you tonight. This one is the current Stepney, I think it's engine 104, correct in that regard? Thank you. I want to thank Chief Rose and the Stepney Department for bringing an opportunity to my attention. They had identified one of our neighboring communities that we utilized through mutual aid quite frequently, that they had some interest in it, and had done some research and found that the price that they were willing to pay was reasonable based upon the vehicle and some of the they did some review and analysis of comparable vehicles based on mileage and the type of the capacity of the tank, the pump that's on there, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have an opportunity to sell this vehicle without any further administrative efforts, and we feel we're getting from what I'm being told, we're getting a fair price. So.
Anything further? No. Mr. Connor?
Just one question. When we buy the trucks, we don't buy them with the supplies on them. Are these trucks going without the stuff that we bought added on? Correct. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, the motion carries 9-0. Moving on to item G, which is the purchase and sale agreement for the 2003 Pierce Enforcer Hollyville Volunteer Fire Company. Ms. LaFleur.
I will introduce the following resolution regarding sale of 2003 Pierce Enforcer ladder truck and move for its adoption. Resolved that Kenneth M. Kellogg, first selectman of the town of Monroe, is authorized to execute and deliver on behalf of the town of Monroe the purchase and sale agreement and the associated transfer of title for the sale of the 2003 Pierce Enforcer ladder truck to the Hawleyville Volunteer Fire Company.
Motion by way of resolution by Ms. LaPellis. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mauer. Again, for discussion purposes, this agreement was reviewed and discussed in LNA. It passed unanimously 3-0 for consideration by council. And we also have an attorney's opinion letter from Attorney Hayden as well. Mr. Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So same exact agreement, the only difference being that we did have a deposit received on that, as I had reported previously, a deposit that obviously was subject to this final agreement. Other than that, that obviously the purchase price is different. A similar situation where we have a neighboring community that is a community that does not have a ladder truck currently, and they are exploring the need for that, and they felt that they wanted something that they could kind of start with, for lack of a better term, and we feel that they actually have a I'm fairly certain that they actually have a donation which is why they're anxious to lock this in. So we obviously think this is a fair price as well, based on the research that was done by the Monroe Volunteer Fire Department. I want to thank Chief Cries for bringing this opportunity to us and working to secure that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against, that motion carries 9-0. Our last item of business this evening is item H, which is the Kids Creation Project Concept Review, which we have before each of us the project concept review worksheet as created by the First Selectman's Office. So I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Kellogg, for introduction.
Thank you. I was wondering if you're going to ask for an executive session first, just so they...
Yeah, that's coming next. That's next.
Sorry, I had to. So I'm happy to turn the floor over briefly to Dan Keene and Teresa Oliar, who have submitted this project, and I want to thank them for all their efforts and future efforts, hopefully, towards this project. The concept review form you have before you, I think, is somewhat self-explanatory. I will note to you that the existing playground is one that we continue to have concerns over. We're actually going to be doing a site visit there this week because of the we know it needs to be addressed, right? So we're trying to figure out what needs to be done in the short term, but we all I think agree that something has to be I think a good project for our community. I have attached for you some of basically the departments and some of the due diligence that was done prior to coming to you and their responses. Obviously, Parks and Rec was supportive. They had some questions I think are somewhat answered. There obviously would be some process in regards to planning and zoning and the usual 824 and those types of things, building permits, but those are things that would be somewhat standard. We have looked at it from an HR and risk management and labor relations perspective. There are certainly some nuances that we'll need to address at the time when it comes to, once we get into specifics of is the volunteer working for the nonprofit or for the town, but those are issues that we feel confident we can address either way. From a finance perspective, I think our preference would be to have the nonprofit simply donate the final product back to the town so that I think that would be much, from an administrative perspective, easier for the town. And our town attorney has opined that there was nothing unusual at this point that he felt needed to raise any flags. Obviously, we would envision a formal agreement at some point between the town and the nonprofit to kind of memorialize the arrangement and how it's going to work. But I felt at this point I had sufficient information to put it before council and recommend that you evaluate it so that we could get to a point where we can give them a green light to proceed with fundraising and make it a legitimate project for our town. And with that, I'd be happy to turn it over to...
Do they have the right to do that tax assessment we just talked about?
Yes, I've spoken to them, encouraged them, and
I thought of you immediately.
Yeah. He reached out to us.
Okay, great.
Yep, they would absolutely qualify, and I think I actually have a company that wants to donate it.
I pledge $10.
Thank you.
All right, well, the floor is yours if you want to explain your vision to us.
Ken summed it up very nicely in terms of, what we're looking to do. Trace, if you want to add anything.
Well, Chairman Lito, when you say our vision, I'd like to think that it actually isn't our vision, but hopefully what our town's vision is of this. And I know that we've spoken before about how you were an original participant in the original playground in the build.
So was I.
And well, but see, the difference was Mr. Lito was a little coerced into it as a teenager who maybe didn't see the full value maybe of it, but I'm sure looks back and is so happy that he was.
Wait, I was coerced as the same thing.
Hey, look, she was coerced. So our goal is to coerce a whole new town
Are
of
you
people.
alleging that back then I didn't foresee living in this wonderful town and having my own
And
children
your children, I
utilize
know,
the same
see,
park
sometimes
that
you
I
don't see
built?
the full circleness of it, right?
And we used
I
to,
did see that.
my student council would stain, and still stains the wood every fall for free.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people doing that, so it got done in 3 hours, totally for free.
For me, I wasn't here then.
Probably weren't even born.
I was born. I wasn't here then, but briefly, let me tell you that Wolf Park is the single most reason that I ended up moving to this community. Because it is open to more than just town residents. I came here when I was a young single mother, and I could come here because the park was free. And I came here and I enjoyed that playground, and my daughter grew up in Wolf Park, and we bought season passes every year and went to the pool. And when it was time to raise my family more and get married and settle down and live in a town, we chose Monroe because we already felt a part of this community. And I look at the playground as a way to continue that for other families. And I think it's really a symbol of our town, a symbol of what our town has done in the past and what our town, I think, can do again. Looking at the document, you'll see that we are hoping to do another community build. I really think that that is the epitome of what makes that playground as special as it is, and also what makes it most cost-effective. So our goal would be to raise the funds. We have put together a board of all local Monroe people who are very passionate and interested in moving forward with a rebuild. And we've made an official 501(c), and we would like to be a very long-term partner with the town for this playground. I'm pretty sure one of the biggest concerns is once the playground is done and beautiful and wonderful, upkeep. What's going to happen? How's it going to be different than last time? I know that didn't go smoothly, so that has been one of the biggest hurdles that we've tackled first. It seems a little backwards, but we want to make sure that any questions you guys have, we've thought of, hopefully. And so one of those is upkeep. Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to take care of it? We've been in contact with other communities who have done the same process, and yet instead of disbanding after the build, they've kept up their nonprofit, and annually they run events to always have money funneled for the upkeep. We've forgoed the original name, Kids Creation, for our personal group. We've instead gone with a more all-encompassing Monroe Playground Foundation. It will be a fund. Monroe Playground Foundation is our official name. This way, if there's another project in town after this, we can be of assistance that way as well. So our goal would be to long-term be involved with the town and Monroe Playgrounds. And this is Dan.
Is it gonna be-
Perfect,
is
this is
it
why I
gonna
let
be-
her talk. I'm work
Is it
project
gonna be wood
administration
like
and
the
things
last
like
one?
that. She's got the passion
So-
behind everything.
Now, playgrounds, none of them are made with wood. Even the original company who we've been in contact with, which is Leathers, they don't make their playgrounds out of wood anymore either. We've been in contact with pretty much all of the companies that do community builds, and also not community builds, because depending on which direction the town would like to go in, we've explored all the options. So we've explored if liability, I know, has been explained and explored and all of that, and so I hope that you feel comfortable with that. For the rest of town council, the company that oversees the build has the liability. So it's not on the town, and so I know that's important. So we've explored the powder coated metal, like some of the other ones. Mostly though, we've explored ones that look and feel similar to our playground. So not just the ones that look simple and put together and they're just not as much character. So we would like to personally, obviously not definitively, but we would like to personally find a playground and a company that would have the feel of our playground, that would have character and incorporate nature around it, and our park is wooded and it's beautiful, and have it stand out like it does now. Have it stand out like, you know, the Sandcastle Playground in Fairfield is still standing. It was also a community build project. Those playgrounds are the ones that people talk about. Those are the ones that people go to Fairfield just to go to that playground. People come to Wolf Park just to come to our playground. So no, it wouldn't be wood, but we'd hope that it would still look like wood. And so there's different materials that would still give that feel and not just the sterile. Really a fan of that one.
Mr. Mauer?
First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to not just both of you, but the entire foundation. I completely agree that this is not only a necessary project, but an extremely important one to the community. Having been somebody that actually did grow up on that playground, and have since brought my nephews to that playground and look forward to bringing my children to that playground, I truly believe what you say when you talk about how it is a staple of this community and how important it is for it to be a community build and for it to be a project that Monroe as a whole can look back on and look forward to. I will say that one of the things I remember most fondly is that not only were the adults involved, but kids were involved. We were involved on the playground, and that is something that I would just ask that the foundation consider is reaching out to the schools, reaching out to the kids, and being sure to include that, because that's, I know, part of what continues to make it special for me, and I hope would do that for the next generation of Monroe children as well.
One of the companies we're talking to actually wants to come into the schools and do like a design day with the students where they get to, you know, draw their perfect playground, and then they try and incorporate those elements into the design. So, you know, they really are trying to bring the community into it, all of them, and really make a playground that, you know, we like to say is worthy of Monroe.
And when you get further along, MRA, which is Massac Representative Assembly, does a lot of that service stuff. Because when I ran it for maybe 20 years, we would every year go there and totally for free, in 3 hours, take the whole place and stain it so that they didn't have to pay to have the park laborers do it. They just supplied the paint, and we went out there and painted it in the fall.
Do you, is the number that you propose, is that, obviously it's a rough number, but is that in the ballpark?
So what we asked the original company, which we figured would give the best cost comparison for then and now, we asked how much it cost then and how much it would cost for a similar playground, same footprint now. And as a community build, we're looking around $300,000.
How much did it cost then?
175,
Yeah.
150, something like that. So it's almost double. A lot of it is going to come down to the material used actually underneath the playground. You know, just thinking about the turf field, things like that, the different materials change the price.
Yeah,
So one of the,
safety.
you know, ideally, what we would like to use, again, this is all in town, this is a personal opinion, I would ideally like to use the poured in, where you can do, it's colorful and it's set and you do
It's
design.
like track surface.
Yeah, and that increases the price a lot.
Do you anticipate, or are you hopeful of raising all of the funds?
Our goal at this point is, accepting that perhaps the town might not be able to take this on. And so we are moving forward with the expectation that we would need to raise all of it.
And
Do we
anticipated?
think we'll be able to do that?
Yes.
I think that,
Yes, we
yes,
do.
we do. What, I should say no. I'll be like, no, I don't, so give me $150,000. No? Oh, sorry.
If you had it your way, what would your anticipated start date be? And how long would the project
To
take?
build?
How long does it take to build?
I'll leave that to my aggressive timeline person, Dave.
So the original timeline was just calling me that. I'm a big believer in work expands the amount of time you give it. So I was trying to really push to have town council approval of some sort of concept, you know, around this time, fundraise through the summer, and actually break ground in the fall. But I think we're going to need more time than that to fundraise all of it. So the proposed timeline right now is fundraising through the spring of 2019 and then kicking off either in the summer or fall of 2019 for the actual build.
That's wonderful. Okay. Mr. Condon?
Question. You have a but you could price 300,000. Is the removal of the existing playground in there because it's refurb or?
It is not.
No, our hope is that we can get that donated
And
as a service in kind, because we're a
And
nonprofit.
we've spoken to a couple of people that would be possible.
And one of the options still on the table, just so everybody knows, that we are evaluating is, do we refurbish what's there? It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense from what we're seeing, but I don't want anybody walking away thinking they just want to tear down the existing playground and build something new. You know, we really feel that our job is to explore all the options and come back to the town with like what we have looked at, and obviously with a recommendation from us, but to take you through the entire process.
And at this point, we will say, speaking to the original company, at this point, for the most part, what they would suggest us keeping is the main pillar posts.
Yeah, if we went down that road.
If we went down that road.
Any thought being given to sectioning it off to like a Rotary section, Lions section, Women's Club section?
We are open to any and all naming
Well,
possibilities.
And from what we understand from the original project, that's kind of how it was done a little bit, that somebody oversaw the boat, and that was theirs, and it was named after somebody's grandfather, and, you know, somebody else oversees that. And we're looking at that, we're also looking at expanding a little bit on some of that, and thinking about doing, like, this is just a detail, fencing around it, but they have donation posts, basically, like you would do a brick, but it would be the post, and it could be families' names. We also have the benches that could be named after somebody, which I think is really special. We've really looked at corporate donating and matching and the neighborhood assistance and fundraisers, and we have started, even though we were not able to solicit funds yet, we have examined so many different areas to come up with the funding for this, and to not only that, but to generate enough excitement in the community to get the community on board to want to help one way or the other.
That's great. Anybody else?
Question?
Ms. Aguilar?
Sorry. One question, have you gotten in touch with Parks and Rec? Because I know Parks and Rec, you do a family movie night. Is there any way to do things with Parks and Rec over the summer for
Oh, yeah,
fundraising?
We'd
absolutely.
love to do that.
Absolutely, it just wasn't a project yet that was officially sanctioned. But we have spoken with Parks and Rec, the commission, and we did speak to Frank Cooper before he retired. So we had been talking to both, and they were obviously eager to be, I mean, this.
Yeah, we came before town council a few months ago and made a promise that we weren't going to fundraise or do any type of official things really until it was before the town council, and you guys looked at it and said, yes, we want you to do this, and so this is us
All right, so I
sticking
think
with that.
we're at that point. Mr. Condon?
Any question on Wi-Fi or security for the area? Cameras or anybody, any investment in that for the playground?
So there's nothing in our plan for that, but, you know, we can figure something out.
All right, so I would certainly be extremely excited and proud to support this as a consensus, so I'll start with myself. I'll start from my right, Mr. Condon.
Favor.
Mr. Rooney? Favor. Mr. Reed? Aye. Mr. Rourke?
In
Mr.
favor.
Fellows? Ms. Martin?
Let's do it.
Ms. Aguilar?
Absolutely.
Mr. Mauer?
Very much in favor.
Thank you so much for your efforts
Thank you
and
so
spearheading
much.
this, and we look
Good
forward
job.
to
Thank you.
helping
Thank
and
you.
hearing about this along the way, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Kellogg, from us?
No, just,
on that?
I want to echo my thanks from the county, echo everything that was said. Thank you for doing this, thank you for taking it on. Look forward to working with you.
So that concludes our business this evening. Second, public participation. Would anybody like to participate? All right, seeing none, I'll close second public participation. Motion to adjourn, please. Motion by Mr. Powell, second by Mr. Reed. All those in favor?
That's the first one I've done.
Motion carries.
That's the first one I've done.
0. Good evening,
I haven't
everybody.
done that before.